Okay.
3 cameras, so.
But we can just talk from here, right?
Grant Russell.
Grant Russell.
Barb Lockard.
Jeff Wobser.
Heidi Mercer.
Tom Schindeldecker.
Mary Harshfield.
A lot of echo.
Maybe we're just hearing it.
Boys in the cars, so going. It's a news story. Good evening. Welcome to our forum, which will begin in seconds.
We got 20 seconds to need the candidates' names, just down 6 steps. So starting there all the way across the street really quick.
Grant Russell.
Barb Lockard.
Jeff Wobser.
Heidi Mercer.
Schindeldecker.
Mary Harshfield.
Not much.
Ooh, there's feedback.
The University of Findlay, and welcome to this City Council at Large Forum, sponsored by the Courier, UFTV, and 1330 WFIN. I'm WFIN News Director Doug Jenkins, and I'll serve as co-moderator for tonight's event. I'll also be joined by the Courier's Steve Dillon. Now, tonight's forum is an opportunity for you to learn more about the 6 people running for 3 City Council at Large seats in Findlay. Steve and I have selected the questions for this evening's forum. No candidate is aware of what they're going to be asked or the order those questions will come. The format for the forum consists of a 2-minute opening. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond to those questions. If we believe a follow-up is necessary, we'll have a follow-up question asked. You'll have 60 seconds to respond to the follow-up as well. And if a candidate calls another candidate, we will ask you if you want to do a round of applause here, and at the end, that's fine. We'll ask you to keep applause to a minimum during the festivities. Well, Grant Russell, you drew number 1 before we started things, so you can lead off with your opening statement.
All right, thank you. Thank you to WFIN, the Courier, and the University of Findlay for hosting this forum tonight. I always appreciate any opportunity to discuss city business pretty much with anybody who will talk to me about it. It's why my team has knocked on hundreds of doors this election season. I especially like talking about the city of Findlay because I believe we have such a good story to share. It's a good story because the city continues to focus on 2 primary areas: the delivery of safety services, your police, fires, and courts, and public infrastructure, the construction and maintenance of our sewers, water systems, roads, parks, and public recreational facilities. It's delivered by a dedicated workforce that is committed to providing the highest quality of work for the citizens of Findlay, and we deliver it in a fiscally sound and efficient manner. Empowered by our mayor and supported by this city council, and especially this councilman, your city has broken the have-it, spend-it cycle that is really commonplace on all levels of government. And I think this is really, truly a remarkable achievement. It enables us to leverage your tax dollars and get the most value possible out of each dollar. I'm proud of the work that the city performs for its citizens. I'm proud of the role that I have played in this success. And I'm excited to have the conversations tonight to talk about the successes we have enjoyed and the challenges our city faces. Thank you.
Barbara Lockard.
Hi, my name's Barb Lockard, and I've been around Findlay for a long time. From 2008 through 2015, I served on the Board of Education for Findlay City Schools. And in that role, I was very involved in the planning and funding of our 2 new middle schools and our Career Technical Center, Millstream. And on the school board, I learned to create policies and procedures. That's real important, and I think that's something that's very important in City Council. I also learned to work within an ever-changing council at large position. Professionally, I spent 5 years as Director of Public Relations and Marketing for the Blanchard Valley Health System, and 2 years as Communications Director for United Way of Hancock County. In those roles, I interacted with local businesses and nonprofits and learned about the needs and the strengths of our community. Currently, I'm in experiential education coordinator areas where I believe that Findlay City Council should put a little bit more focus. Thank you.
Mr. Wobser.
Thank you, Doug. My name is Jeff Wobser, and I'm running for my second seat on council as an incumbent Republican. I was born and raised in Findlay and grew up on the north end of town. And in 2001, my wife and I moved back to town, and we've been here. And when I got back to town, I had the opportunity to take over as head coach of the Findlay High School swim team. And I did that to pay back what I felt was a debt to this community that I owed them, because swimming here in this town and what the town afforded me allowed me to do a lot of things outside of Findlay. I've worked for Marathon now for 30 years, and that was one of the things that I was able to do because of that, my swimming background. But what I found as head coach was that to be the best at being a coach, to be effective at being a head coach, it took 1.5 to 2 years until you could learn the game, learn and understand what it took to be effective not only at the local level but at the state level. And what I found at City Council is it is exactly the same. Experience matters. And over this last 1.5, almost 2 years now, I've had the opportunity to go through 2 budget cycles, start the 3rd budget cycle here in another 60 days. And those are the experience things that you have to be effective at this job. And I look forward to continuing to do that. Part of that experience has come with being on the Parks and Rec Committee, also on the Appropriations Committee that does all of the appropriations for expenditures. And then also, something I'm very proud of is I'm on the Raise the Bar Board of Directors, which is our workforce enhancement group that's looking to increase our number of skilled labor workers in the county. Lastly, I was able to put together and get approved by council this year. Excuse me. Thank you.
We'll move on to Ms. Mercer.
Thank you. I want to thank the Courier, WFIN, and UFTV for hosting tonight's event and for creating space to have this dialogue here in Findlay. Like Jeff, I was also born and raised in Findlay. I grew up in a working class family. My parents instilled a strong work ethic and a deep sense of giving back to the community. So I, of course, chose to attend the University of Findlay, and my choice to pursue social work as a career wasn't difficult, and I've never looked back. I've served 2 terms with AmeriCorps, following in the footsteps of my grandfather, who served with the CCC in the 1930s. Coming back to Findlay after a decade working through the US and the UK, I felt that it was time, if ever, to throw my hat in the ring to run for City Council at large. We all want to live in an open, welcoming city that's safe, and I want to ensure diversity, transparency, and openness around the table when we make decisions for the city. A priority of mine is to represent the younger future generations of Findlay. The things that are happening in Findlay are impacting greatly on this demographic. The opiate crisis is affecting all parts of our community, but my generation is disproportionately being impacted. As a voice for my peers, I hope to push forward an agenda for decent, affordable housing, development of future job prospects that can support a living wage. Young people are the future of this community, and we need to provide them with the tools and the skill sets to have the same financial and housing opportunities as were given to the generations before. City Council is best run with all different voices around the table, and Findlay is no exception. I'm Heidi Mercer, and I'm looking for your vote on November 7th. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Schindeldecker.
My name is Tom Schindeldecker, and I'm seeking my third term on City Council. I look down the table and see the difference between the incumbents and the challengers. Well, first of all is the gender. Secondly, the experience, and I think this is where we draw the line to some extent. After 45 years with WFIN and several times sitting on the table over there where our moderators are, I was elected to City Council, and I kind of thought I knew it all. I didn't. Probably the thing that I learned most, and I hope rather quickly, on City Council, which I didn't know before as an observer, was you have to think at least 2 or 3 steps ahead on practically every issue. There are some things that are obviously a yes or a no vote. Most things have several different elements. You might agree with 1 or 2, but not the third. This is something that is important. The ability to consider all of the aspects of the issues that come before us, the timing, the cost, the benefits. I think this is what sets the incumbents apart from our worthy challengers, and I would hope that obviously during the course of this forum we will be discussing the specific issues. So I've stayed away from the specific issues. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity for that.
All right, and Ms. Harshfield.
Thank you very much. To begin with, I would like to thank the Courier, WFIN, and the University of Findlay for hosting this important event. I always appreciate getting a chance to let my views out. Findlay is where I also grew up and formed my values. I went to school here, I graduated from Findlay High School, and I went to this institution for a year when it was still known as Findlay College, but I like the new name a lot. As a sophomore, I transferred to Bowling Green State University, where I earned my degree to teach French and English, and while teaching later, I also got a master's degree. My first teaching job was actually in Delphus, Ohio, and I later had to move to Michigan in order to get the particular job I wanted at that time. To pay for my education, I worked at different times as a telephone operator, an office clerk. I was a waitress a lot. I worked in a factory for a short time. And I also, I know I left one out. But I really had some tough times back in there trying to pay for my education. I also had to take out loans. So I feel that I have a lot of understanding at this time of what it's like to have a hard time, and I think a lot of families around here and much of the country are having an equally, much worse, probably worse time than I did financially. I think that unfortunately the bills seem to always go up and the paychecks go up a little bit or not at all. We need to address the issues for our hardworking citizens who may need a bit more attention in order to give them a little boost and to help end some of their exasperation with the problems they run into in their own homes or in their neighborhoods.
That's the 2-minute warning right there.
Okay.
So that will bring us now to our question and answer portion of the forum. Steve Dillon has the first question.
Okay. Findlay should begin 2018 in a very solid financial position, something Auditor Jim Stashak reported in a recent pre-budget planning meeting. But as history has proven many times, economic conditions can quickly change. What do you believe needs to be done to best prepare the city for its next rainy day? We'll start with you, Ms. Lockard.
Okay. Yes, I've been reading about the pre-budget meeting that was just held, I believe, last week, and also studying the mid-year report that came out in June this year. I think what can best prepare our city is more long-term issued in June was that long-term planning continues to be an outstanding weakness of our city. It should be addressed prior to adding recurring costs or new large cost items. Contingency plans and less in operations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This is a great question because we're in a sound financial position right now. It's a great situation that we're in such that we can have this conversation about having more money than we actually need right now versus less, and it would be much tougher to have that conversation. What do we need to do going forward? The thing that we already passed with council is having our strategic planning committee. The biggest thing that we're going to do, two things, is number one, we're going to have our five-year plan that will look at all of our major investments and where we want to go on spending in 5 years. That will ask the administration to give us a budget that will work within that 5-year plan. Next would be our cash management plan. For instance, we need to take a hard look at, yes, we have cash on hand, but actually the debt markets right now are relatively inexpensive. Should we look at taking and financing some of our larger investments and saving our cash for a later point in time? It's something that we need to look at. Thank you.
Ms. Mercer?
I also had a look at the mid-year review, and something that I found was really interesting is there was an area for concern about not enough consideration for demographics. And what I found really disheartening was the state of the poverty rate for Ohio is 14.8. In Findlay, it's 19.2. So considering our town's demographics are at a 19.2% of people living in poverty, this is meaning that we need to be looking more at well-paid jobs, affordable housing, and increase to public transportation. All of these things that are keeping people, our community members, our constituencies in poverty. And I think that this is something that is good business, that we need to be considering how we can give people a leg up in our town to be able to contribute back to our financial plan and our taxes here in the city of Findlay. And I think that essentially this could be a bread and butter issue.
That's 1 minute there.
Sure. Thank you.
What do we need to do to prepare for the next rainy day? Well, first of all, we have a $1 million rainy day fund that's over and above the approximately $13 million surplus that the city has. So we have done planning for what happens in the future. We'll go back to 2008 when the bottom dropped out of the market. We had a much more modest surplus prior to that, but when the downturn came pretty soon, we were in a deficit spending situation to the point where additional police and firefighters that we had hired in the better days had to be laid off for some time. I don't want to see our surplus used to hire people. That surplus has given us an opportunity to leverage a lot of funds from the state. Toward the end of the year, the ABC Village does not have the funds to do this project. If you can match the funds, we'll give it to you. Also, the state is starting to put the...
1 minute there, actually.
Financial... Oh, I'm sorry.
One more.
Skip Mary. We'll go back to Mary.
It's a long way over there.
This might be the longest table we've ever had for one of these.
I like to think, too, we need to pay attention to the infrastructure. I think it's good that we have a good fund that's ready and waiting for any emergencies. I also worry, though, I'm wondering if people have thought ahead to some of the kind of drastic emergencies that we're seeing around the whole country, in the Caribbean right now, and other earth-shaking things that are happening in the world. I keep wondering what kind of other disasters, like we did have a derecho once, which had a bad effect on Findlay. And I just think that it's a good idea for us to try to predict even further over some of the more ordinary kinds of disasters we think about. I don't think you can be prepared for everything, but anyway, I think giving that some thought would be an additional thing we could do over some of the other good answers that I heard already tonight.
Okay.
All right. The city is in its strong financial position right now as a result of good planning and executing those plans. We do have a $1 million rainy day fund. Our health insurance fund is fully funded. We take our budget surpluses and leverage that money for the next year. We're usually first out to bid in our capital plans, and that gives us the ability to get the most done for the dollar, because contractors now know that we are ready to go as soon as the season will allow for work to start. We have a rolling 5-year capital plan, and even though we've started to see some uncertainty in our income streams, we're not laying off people, it's not affecting city operations. This year, instead of moving our capital spending up to be 21% of our income tax collections, it's remaining at 20%. And this is something that is laddered up 1% a year up until this year. It's the first, for next year, will be the first year that we don't ladder it up another percent. So,
a minute at that point.
All right.
I do have a follow-up before Steve asks his next question. Ms. Mercer, you brought up the element of job creation and getting people to work in Findlay. So I'll pose the question to the entire panel here. What is the city's role in that regard in trying to get people to work? Or is there a role for that in the city government altogether? And I believe we start with Ms. Lockard, so we'll go that same way.
For one again, huh? Yeah, I think the city can entice people to come and work. You know, I work for a university right now, and the job situation is really changing. People need 4-year degrees, but we also need people that have high technical skills. I think one of the things the city needs to do is help market those jobs a little better. A truck driver is no longer just a truck driver. There's somebody that's actually computer programming, you know, and doing things like that. So we have to convince students and parents that these are honorable, intelligent occupations that are needed and will be available. We also need to provide affordable housing. I don't mean subsidized housing necessarily, I mean affordable housing, so that if someone works here, they can also afford to live here and live here comfortably. One of the things we're looking at, again, at the college is the robotization of jobs. It almost sounds like science fiction, but if you need a tool and die maker today, that job may not be here 5 years from now. So I think a lot of that is future planning, and the city needs to look ahead and see what's going to happen.
That's 1 minute.
One of the interesting things in Hancock County is our unemployment rate is below 4%. In fact, quite a bit below. The majority of the people who would like to have a job, there are jobs available. We have a worker deficit in Hancock County. Anywhere from 500 to 1,000 jobs are looking to be filled at any point in time. So our problem is how do we get workers in there, into Hancock County, and to fill these jobs? Like Barb said, we need to continue to work on pushing kids or showing our students that there are good jobs and good wages to be made in the skilled labor. That is what Raise the Bar is doing, and that's what City Council has invested in, $30,000 this year and $30,000 next year, and hopefully for the years ongoing, that will help do that for this community.
Okay. Ms. Mercer?
Recently, our mayor spoke about having to import skilled trade people in town. And I also found an article from Forbes that highlighted the need for vocational training. So a little bit what Barb was saying, the people in our town are struggling to find electricians and plumbers, and why aren't we, you know, building up those Millstream courses to kind of, you know, encourage that type of training in order to meet the demand. And I'd also have to wonder a little bit about okay, so if, you know, the unemployment rate is low, I'm concerned about the type of wage that people are earning. So what we know is that minimum wage doesn't cut it for people, so they're often having to work several jobs to make ends meet and to particularly afford rent in this town. I think we need to be considering what living wage would look like in Findlay.
Mr. Schindelbecker?
Well, I'm glad, among other things, that over the past few years, I think we've gotten away from the stigma that everyone has to have a college education. We have a grandson who's attending welding school in Jacksonville, Florida right now, and I look at what he has in the future, and I'm expecting that he will be able to support us in the style to which we'd like to become accustomed. But it's an ongoing thing, the job situation. It is not something that council can do a whole lot about by ourselves, but with people like Jeff, who's on that committee, working with the educators, working with the Alliance, working with the universities, the vocational schools, and so forth, and also with the business community. We can maybe do a better job of focusing in on what is going to be needed in the job field in the future. Heidi has mentioned several times about housing. I would totally agree with that. As a matter of fact, I was quoted as saying so in the paper on Saturday. However, that again is something that council needs to keep an eye on, but we cannot do it by ourselves.
Okay. I tend to agree with much of what's been said. I think that it's very important to let some of these students understand how much money they can make if they go into the skilled trades and how many college bills they won't be having as a result. It's a good living. I also think, though, that there's a lot more to it than that. I think we should be trying really hard to recruit people from who recently graduate from the University of Findlay. There's a lot of potential diversity there, but everybody will need the housing. That's the biggest problem, is that we have several new projects going up, but they tend to be very expensive, and we need more lower income housing. It wouldn't hurt to also make their lower income a little bit higher. Nobody's suggested the idea of a minimum wage of about $15 an hour yet, which is probably pretty unrealistic around here, but it wouldn't hurt.
1 minute there, actually.
Okay.
Mr. Russell?
Workforce development has been identified as a major issue facing the community. It's why the Raise the Bar organization was founded. It's why the city has committed $30,000 this year and $30,000 next year. One of the strongest opponents of that commitment on City Council was Jeff Wobser, and that's why it was fantastic that he was the one that volunteered to represent the City of Findlay on the City Council on the Raise the Bar Committee. We're going to be hearing from their executive director here in the next couple of weeks, and I appreciate Jeff's desire to step forward, even though it wasn't something he initially agreed with. That's the kind of quality person Jeff is. But the Raise the Bar, working with economic development, the United Way, the University of Findlay, Millstream, Findlay City Schools, that's working cooperatively with all these community partners. That's where the city's role in workforce development lies.
Okay.
Okay, next question. What specific actions would you take to ensure public transparency regarding council activities? We'll start with you, Mr. Wobser.
It's a great question, and it's a topic that's been thrown around quite a bit. City Council is subject to sunshine laws. Mr. Russell is our representative that takes the courses and certifies that we are doing everything by and around those laws. The auditor this past year implemented the online system where anybody can go online and look at all the expenses and who they went to and where the checks were written. So to me, there's nothing that really gets much more transparent than that. Now the meetings are open to the public, they're published, and anybody can come and join those meetings. And I would actually hope that when people talk about transparency, that they would come to these meetings and be part of the process. That means starting with getting out to vote and then coming and getting involved. There's many times that we talk about topics that, quite frankly, we would love to have more input from the community. So to me, that would be transparency.
Thank you. Ms. Mercer?
So I think when I go to the city council meetings, sometimes I'm often confused about what's actually happening. A lot of practices of the foregoing the 3 readings and declaring emergency procedures seems to happen quite a bit. And the concern with that is that there's little input or opportunity for input for public or to kind of see discussions being had. I also think there's not really a vetting process on requests coming in. So that I think that there's a big sort of like gap between the constituents feeling like they can engage with city council or can go to those meetings. I think it's twofold, right? Like, we need to be armed and empowered to come to city council, but also city council kind of reaching out and engaging the community maybe a little bit better.
Wendell Decker.
A lot has been made of late of the fact that occasionally, or maybe too often according to some, we pass legislation without giving 3 readings. I just want to point out, sometimes, particularly when we're working with other groups, such as with the county commissioners on Dorney Plaza, such as with the county commissioners, the state of Ohio, and the alliance with dealing with the former Brown Mackey building, sometimes things come to us rather late. We have to keep in mind the county commissioners meet twice a week. The legislature, when they're in session in Columbus, meets on an average of about 3 days a week. Sometimes things come to us at a point where we have to make a quick decision. That was the case in all of those 3 items that I proposed, that I mentioned. As far as transparency was concerned, when the open meetings law was first enacted, Paul Gilmore was state Senate president. I was the president of the State Associated Press Broadcasters. I participated in several of the hearings.
Ms. Hirschfeld.
I appreciate the fact that the open meetings law has been instituted. Unfortunately, following the letter of the law doesn't always result in the transparency we'd like to see. Sometimes it would be good to have more information ahead of time about what other meetings have taken place to form some of the opinions that are already there. I would like to see a way, too, in the meetings. There is so much documentation behind what's going on there. I would like to see some sort of a summary right on the agenda that lets you know a little bit better about what is behind the actions being taken at the meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Russell.
Public transparency is important. That's why the state of Ohio and Ohio revised code says that we must meet in an open manner, and the city of Findlay and city council does. We follow Robert's rules, which really stifles a lot of the open conversation that we can have. In order to have open debate at a council meeting, we have to have an ordinance that has had a motion to be approved, and that can't happen until after a third reading. I personally would like to see more open discussion of a lot of our items at council meetings, but we follow Robert's rules, and that's just our requirement. Public transparency, though, in financial expenditures, we have two open checkbook systems: the one provided by the state auditor and the one that the city auditor has stood up. And so you have multiple ways to see the information. Our agendas and minutes are posted on our website, and my phone number's available. I'm always available by email, website, or just ask me a question. So in essence, every first and third Tuesday of every month, 7:30, City Council chambers, the city is all welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Lockhart.
Thank you. I think one of the best ways to assure transparency is to have a set of written policies and procedures. That way all of us can check and see why something happens, who gets this and who doesn't. One of the big issues I think has been the least transparent this year has been the deferment of income taxes for certain businesses. This has created a loss in income for the city, but the numbers I understand this year are being made available to council, but not the names. So your business can get a deferment and my business may not. There should be a policy so that we should all be able to, and this is one thing I learned on school board, not that our policies were perfect, but you should be able to read down the line and see why this is happening. Another thing is, I'm not sure how late items can be accepted for the agenda. I've been at council meetings where they've said, oh, I got an email on this like yesterday. I really think the agenda should be cut off, except for emergency items, a few days before council meetings so that the public can know what's on that agenda. Another thing, I think letters that come into council should be attached to the agenda. Okay, thank you.
All right, looks like I have the next question. You may have noticed a little bit of road construction going on in downtown Findlay. We hear from it in the media. I'm sure you hear from it as candidates or as members of council. How do you respond when a constituent argues that the work was either poorly scheduled or perhaps unnecessary? And I believe we start with Ms. Mercer on this question.
So I think it's important to sit down and listen and give space for that, right? Because that's what a part of being on city council is. And then trying to explain the process of that, because obviously this has been an ongoing talk amongst city council about the bump outs and when that was going to take place, and trying to align everybody's work schedules. You know, and I think that it's important to hear and validate those concerns, but sometimes things just have to get done. I think bigger, though, is that there's been a large number of constituents upset and not wanting these bump outs, and was there space for them to discuss that, and was there more discussion around other options for the downtown area?
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Well, to borrow a phrase from the Ohio Department of Transportation, and I'm not sure it affects I-75 as much as we'd like, there's a question, the phrase is short-term pain, long-term gain. The fact that we have an operating surplus has allowed the city of Findlay to contract early. We know that we're going to be able to do X number of projects, and we can, and the contractors know we have the money. We can let those contracts early in the construction season, even before it starts, and get a better price. So we get more bang for our buck than most communities. As far as the time that it takes, I wish I had an answer for that too. I don't, but I can say as we come toward the end of the season, sometimes contractors will finish a job and have a crew in place. Hey, if we can come up with another couple $100,000, we can do pay 3 more streets. We've been able to do that. It is a difficulty to get around. I sometimes think I ought to be parachuted when I have to go to council meetings.
Thank you. Ms. Hart?
My main thought is that it seems like so much work is all being done at exactly the same time, and there's so much disruption. Basically, it seems like worthwhile work, but there needed to have been maybe more warning or education for the public ahead of time, and somehow try to have found a way to do it more in segments and not have the entire length of Main Street for so far tied up for such a long time.
Mr. Russell.
We have a lot of road construction in Findlay. What a wonderful problem to have. I can find you a countless number of Ohio communities who would love to have the road construction that we're having in Findlay. That's a sign that we have the ability to fund it and the ability to construct it. For citizens who come and talk to me with concerns about downtown Findlay, I agree. It has been painful and it's ongoing. But as Tom said, I hope that the short-term pain is more than offset by the long-term gain. I agree that this is one project where the city has not done a very good job in communicating what is going to happen and when. It's something that we need to continue to work on, how we communicate through the city. But it also doesn't help when the Findlay Courier writes or publishes letters to the editor like the one today that said this work was being done by City of Findlay employees. That is absolutely false, and it's well known that it is false. It's being done by a private contractor. Thank you.
Excellent. Ms. Lockard.
Yes, thank you. Again, echoing what Mr. Russell said, I think a lot of the problem has been in communication, and especially to our downtown businesses, maybe when a street's going to be closed, maybe when parking is going to be limited. But I do agree that we all hate traffic jams, but I think once this is done, everybody will be strutting around very proudly about it. It was designed to be safer. The bump outs actually make it safer to cross the street, as do the pedestrian islands. Somebody mentioned to me about trees. Well, they're taking all the trees out. Well, the trees weren't the kind that should have been there in the first place. I have one by my yard, and they are being replaced with trees that will flourish in an urban environment. So again, echoing what everybody said, short-term pain, long-term gain.
Mr. Wobser?
The hard and very cold facts of the matter are that we live in Ohio, Northwest Ohio, and we have a very short construction season. So we've got to get a lot of work done in a relatively short amount of time. So that does compact a lot of things that have to be done, and it would seem like it's all being done at the same time, because quite frankly it is. I would say, though, that we could probably do a better job on communication to let people know when things are going to be down. However, it's in the paper every Monday, or what streets are going to be shut down. The head engineer sends out an email to council and to all the businesses downtown through this construction project, so they're all very aware of what's going to be happening within the next week. So communication could always be enhanced. We could always do a better job there, but it is a good problem to have that we have a lot of construction being done, and we've got the money to do it and keep our roads in safe and drivable conditions.
We're getting close to the midway point. I think we have time for maybe one more question before we take our halftime break, if you will. We'll stay on the topic of infrastructure. Outside of what's happening downtown with the road work, what is Findlay's greatest infrastructure need beyond that? And how is that being prepared for in the future? And we'll start with Mr. Schindeldecker.
Well, sewer lines and water lines are something that, you know, they're not very sexy, but they need to be taken care of. We recently purchased some Rube Goldberg type equipment that allows us to determine the how well they're holding up and where weaknesses are and where they need to be replaced. We do have a program, ongoing program of replacing some of those units on a yearly basis. Our water plant's in good shape. Our sewage plant is in good shape. Matter of fact, the water department is running a surplus, and the Courier had an editorial just today that maybe we ought to think about a rate cut for water. I think we should think about that, absolutely. That'll be coming up in December, early December, when we have our budget hearings. We try to have an ongoing program for our infrastructure improvement.
Okay. There's a minute. Ms. Harshfield?
I agree that the infrastructure, especially such as related to having good quality water delivery to all of our homes, is really important. The thing that I hear about the most, though, from friends and relatives around town is that their side streets and alleys are in horrible condition, and I have to drive on some of them myself sometimes. Potholes that you can't avoid, and I do think that somehow more attention needs to go to these more remote areas of town.
Roads are a never-ending infrastructure need. It's one of the reasons why the city is investing in a citywide street study so that we can ensure that we are going to be doing our road work in the places that need it most. Alley construction, if you have an alley problem, contact me. I'll get Dave Hansen in touch with it, and it'll be taken care of. I think he's made some tremendous progress in the alley work that the city crews perform. One of our challenges that I see coming out is something called combined sewer overflow. You might not know what it is, but the EPA sure does, and it just takes a stroke of the EPA's pen to say that they want to see more work on our combined sewer overflow, and we will be using all of that surplus in our sewer fund to be taking care of that. We are working through those methodically. Once again, we have a plan, we're taking care of it. But honestly, our greatest infrastructure need is continuing to keep up and maintain what we have.
Real quick before we go to Ms. Lockard, I know we're approaching the halftime break. Are we good to finish this series of questions and then? Okay, we'll continue. Ms. Lockard, we'll go next to answer here.
I think considering the large cash carryovers that we're going to have, that we need to look a little bit more at infrastructure. It seems like the auditor has been urging council for what seems like years to do a complete audit of our infrastructure. That's our storms, our sewers, and our streets. Mr. Schindeldecker mentioned that we're in good shape, but I don't think we know that if our infrastructure is in good shape unless that audit is done and everything is examined. The auditor also said that long-term capital maintenance costs should be calculated for facilities, sidewalks, streets, and that ODOT recommends 6.6% of pavement be maintained each year. So I think we need to look a lot deeper into our infrastructure and invest some of our cash surplus in that.
Mr. Wobser.
I would tend to agree with what Barb just said. The state audit that was just done shows us that from their calculations, which are rather broad, shows that our cost of what we're spending on capital improvements and infrastructure is just barely keeping up with where it's declining and depreciating. So we need to look at that, and we've actually done that. So my point is, we're looking at that. It was accounted for in this budget cycle. We purchased a truck that will go through and do a research on all the streets in the city, and we'll know exactly what streets, what kind of construction they're in, where they're at, condition, and then we can prioritize those and get that done. So we're taking that all into account, and we increased our capital budget to do more on infrastructure. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
Okay, finally, Ms. Mercer.
So it sounds like everything's going tickety-boo with infrastructure, but I think my question that I would have is, how is this kind of involving the environment? One thing that I was wondering, we see it in other urban areas, are these things called rain gardens, which is kind of, it's planted in a depression or a hole that allows rainwater to run off. Urban areas like roofs or driveways or walkways, and I think with all of the cement that we're, bumping out, would that be something that could be considered, when we've got all of the flooding that's happening, how can we sort of work with the environment that we have and be a little bit more friendly, a little bit more sustainable within that infrastructure for the long haul? That's just kind of a question.
Okay. With that, we're at the halfway point of tonight's forum. We'll step aside for a 2-minute break. When we come back, several more questions and closing statements from our candidates. We'll be right back.
Being a champion takes more than talent, more than the perfect pass, more than using your head. Being a champion takes the spirit to always push harder, the ability to overcome any hurdle, and the fire to be the best. Welcome to Division 2, where the pursuit is yours to create. And the question isn't, can you do it? It's, will you?
There's one thing you can never have sex without.
It's not something you buy.
Or something you take.
In fact, there's only one way to get it.
It has to be given to you, freely.
It's consent.
Because sex without it isn't sex.
It's rape. Consent.
If you don't get it, you don't get it.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Wasbro Rental Property is a family-owned and operated residential rental company serving Findlay, Ohio and the surrounding areas. For over 50 years, Wasbro Rental Property has helped residents find the right apartment to fit their needs. Go to theshermanhouse.net for more rental information or call 419-423-8321. Wasbro is proud to support the Findlay Media Network.
Being a champion takes more than skill, more than endless drills, more than using your head. Being a champion takes the heart to give it your all, the agility to thrive from any angle, and the relentless drive to be the best. Welcome to Division 2, where the pursuit is yours to create, and the question isn't, can you do it? It's, will you?
And welcome back to our 2017 City Council at Large Candidate Forum. I'm Doug Jenkins. Steve Dillon will be rejoining me shortly as we continue to talk to the 6 candidates running for 3 City Council at Large positions. Steve will have the next question here. I do want to remind you that this is being broadcast live on WFIN at WFIN.com and live on UFTV's YouTube channel as well. Hey, Steve.
Hi. Thanks for waiting.
Steve will have the next series of questions. A reminder, 1 minute per answer, and I'll be keeping the time up here.
Okay, we'll start with Mary on this next question. Some people in the community believe City Council appears to be in lockstep with the administration on most matters, and that Council should do more to fully vet administration requests before passage. Either as an incumbent looking out or a challenger looking in, what, if anything, would you like to see change in the way the city goes about its business?
Looking at it from the outside, not having quite as much familiarity as what the present council members have, it does look that way. It looks like there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we have no idea of. And I am not sure what all the solutions are. I do think that it's something we need to work on. And I would hope that the council does as sort of a priority over the next year, because the community is really concerned about that. It seems like things happen. I guess maybe one of the examples I think of is back to the streets again. There was a lot of opposition to the original plan, and some modifications happened. A lot of people felt that it would be a bad thing to have the backup parking. Now, I don't mind backing up to park. I think it's easier than parallel parking anyway. But a lot of people objected to it, and because of that, they changed it. And then they did the test streets on Crawford. And
okay, Mr. Russell?
I wouldn't say that we're lockstep with the administration, but I definitely agree with the direction that the administration is taking the city. The mayor and her team has done an outstanding job. So if I'm lockstep with the success that this city has had over the last couple of years, then so be it. I'm comfortable with that. However, the disagreements that I have with the mayor and with the administration don't happen with me grandstanding and trying to get on the newspaper or the radio to call attention to myself. I try to work collaboratively with everybody, because the only thing that counts in the end is, are we satisfying and working for the citizens of Findlay? It's not about me, it's about the citizens of Findlay. And so those conversations are held in that manner, and are held one-on-one with individual departments, and then we work from there with the focus always on the citizens of Findlay.
Okay, Ms. Lockard?
Yeah, I know that, and I know, again, bringing up school board, and I'm sure council is the same way. You get reams and reams of paper and documents thrown at you, and as much as you try, sometimes it's very hard to keep up with everything. You have people that are in their full-time jobs. We had a school superintendent, the council has mayor, that you do have to trust to a point to carry out some things. And so I think you start developing a little bit of a skill to be able to read through this stuff very quickly, and every once in a while your hand needs to go up and say, but wait, what about this particular thing? I think it's a skill that you have to perfect between being an obstructionist and being somebody that just agrees all the time. And I must admit, I think that's very difficult, but you need to look at things like that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wobser?
I would agree with Grant in that the majority of the time and the majority of the legislation that we're dealing with on a night-to-night basis are things that are shared goals with the administration. What streets are we going to pave? A lot of this stuff is all done during the budget process. We've agreed on where we want to go. Now, do we need to continue to work on that? Yes, and that's what the Strategic Planning Committee is going to do, to continue to look forward and make sure that that direction coincides with council, the administration, and of course, starting with the citizens. But I would never be one, I think, to have work in lockstep with the administration. In fact, I've many times have disagreed with the mayor or part of her administration, but we do that in a good way and trying to get to a point where we make the best decision for the city and for the money that we have.
Thank you. Ms. Mercer?
Well, I think from an outsider looking into City Council, the most concerning thing is that it's very one-sided. It's all Republican, and I feel that, actually I did some research on this because I wanted to see if this is kind of a common occurrence, and actually for cities Findlay size, there is a definite mix of Democrats and Republicans that sit on city council. So the concerning part of me is that when you've got one party just being represented, there's not a lot of maybe dialogue or issues that are being looked at from other points of view. It just doesn't. And so I think we need to be considering that with this election, and also considering that council members have made very bold statements that they don't want to see Democrats in city council. And they're worried that if one gets on, that there might be more to follow, and I don't see why that would be a bad thing.
Okay, Mr. Schindecker.
Well, you used the term lockstep. I would use the term blockstep. I don't think there's a problem, particularly with the three incumbents who sit up here and being in lockstep with the mayor. As Jeff in particular said, we have shared goals for the most part. There are others, I think, who are causing greater problems by seemingly attempting to block most anything that the mayor has proposed. I don't think we have that. I have disagreed with the mayor for parts of several complicated issues. Maybe there are three prongs to a particular issue and we agree on two, but we don't agree on the third. And we have made compromises both ways to get the job done.
Okay, Ms. Harshfield?
I think we started.
Oh, we did. Okay, next question. I'm sorry. And this one will start with Grant. Ditch cleaning projects are typically the domain of the county commissioners and paid for by assessments. However, Findlay has agreed to pay for a portion of the Dalzell ditch cleaning. Do you agree with this move, and why or why not?
It's kind of funny. I pulled out a piece of paper that I've been carrying with me since July 16, 2013. It is a document that Jill Schrader brought to Findlay City Council to tell us about Dalzell Ditch. I went out and met Jill with Commissioner Robertson and Councilwoman Frischie and others to review the ditch, and it's taken that long to finally get this ditch to the point where it's being cleaned. One of the ways that the city, this is an infrastructure project, and on behalf of our citizens, we committed some of our capital dollars to help with their assessments, because a large portion of it does go through the city of Findlay. There's no doubt that it is a county. It's in the county's wherewithal to and control to actually execute the cleaning of the ditch. But is it appropriate? Absolutely. And lastly, I thank Jill for coming and bringing this to the council's attention, and for her sticking with it. Sorry it took us this long, and to the folks on the north side neighborhood, we're going to get it cleaned, we're going to get it done, we're going to get it maintained, and it's going to be better.
Thank you. Ms. Lockhart?
Yeah, I actually had in some of my comments tonight that we have a reason to celebrate this fall, that the Dalzell ditch is finally maybe going to get cleaned. This has just taken years and years, and I realize that it is officially a county responsibility to clean this ditch, and there are others as well. But North End homes have been impacted severely by the Dalzell ditch being blocked, and I believe that council could have had a stronger voice in this. I mean, you know, go lie on the county commissioner's doorstep if you have to, because, you know, people are being flooded. So I really do think that council needs to apply pressure to the Hancock County commissioners when it comes to maintaining the things that we can control within our city.
Mr. Wobser.
This is a great situation that shows the benefit of having two other people on council that have a historic viewpoint of Dalzell Ditch. Since I've only been involved for the last year and a half, I did not know where we were at on this previously, that we had allocated money for it, and that we had a history with this. So knowing that we already had the money there, that we were just simply waiting for the county commissioners to get their act together and get going, was great news for me. So yes, I'm glad that we're doing it. Yes, the city should be involved with it, and I'm glad we allocated money to get that done. And as we go forward, there's going to be things that we need to collaborate on with the county to make these projects run. Dorney Plaza is a great example of it. As much as we would love to be able to make a phone call and get the commissioners to do something, that just doesn't happen. They have their own budget and their own people that they've got to deal with, and their own agendas. So we have to work with them as best we can, and hope that they get it done too.
Okay, Ms. Mercer.
I think this is a good example of City Council listening to constituents and trying to act on their best behalf. I think, without repeating what these three have just said, I think maybe moving forward, it's how can we better collaborate with the county commissioners on these types of projects to move forward, and I don't know if that would be something to consider, like having a spokesperson going, speaking, or I don't know, like, but if these things keep getting held up, much like Dorney Plaza, much like this project, much like the flooding mitigation issues that we have, history is just going to continue to repeat itself with some of these more pressing and concerning issues for our constituents.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schindeldecker.
The Dalzell ditch had not been cleaned in over 100 years. I'm overjoyed that we're finally getting the job done, and I think it was certainly worthwhile to put $300,000 from the city into that fund. Unfortunately, the county commissioners and the city of Findlay have different financial situations. The commissioners, and by the way, we have worked very well with the commissioners over the last 4 or 5 years. Not only on the Dalzell ditch, but on the Dorney Plaza, on the combining of the city and the county health departments. We have a very good relationship. It was important that the Dalzell ditch be done. It was a danger both to the environment and to the health of people. It was nothing but an open sewer.
Ms. Harshfield.
I don't have much to add. I pretty well agree with the other answers. I feel that probably the council now does have its frustrations with the problem, and we would all be in sympathy with that. So I would also like to see more action on the problems that have been piling up, and it is good that one thing is started.
Okay. So we've already touched on it a little bit tonight in talking about the collection of taxes from businesses. I think all 6 of you have gone on the record about how you feel about how certain businesses pay quarterly estimates while others can defer until later in the year. So what I'll ask you in this question is to briefly say if you agree or disagree with it. If you agree with it, is there anything that can be done to perhaps make it better so it's more palatable to those who perhaps disagree with it? If you disagree with it, how then should it be done to then keep finances in order? I know that's a mouthful. If you want me to restate it, I will. So let's go back. Let's try that again. Well, I will do my best to rephrase that. So the topic of tax collection for businesses has come up in several of these sessions that we've had over the years. Do you agree with the practice of businesses being able to defer towards the end of the year rather than make quarterly payments? If not, how would you do it better? If you do agree with it, are there ways to make the process a little bit better? Does that make more sense that way? All right, second time's a charm. Ms. Locker, we'll start with you.
Right. As I said before, first off, it is not an illegal practice, but Findlay is the only municipality in the state of Ohio that does this, that allows businesses to defer taxes to the year end. This has cost the city about, I think, $1.2 million this past year because these taxes are deferred. The businesses get to invest that money. The city does not. But again, if we are going to do that, then let's lay it out why people do get these deferments and why others do not. You know, again, it's not an illegal practice, but it's a practice that probably I don't agree with. And I think probably should be stopped. And if not, at least make the names of the businesses available that are getting those tax deferments.
Mr. Wilson?
This is a great example of an item where I do not most certainly walk in lockstep with the mayor and with the administration. Now, the mayor will tell you that they don't defer taxes. She uses a different term. We've had this conversation many times with her last year and a little bit this year. And with the help of Councilman Frischie, we were able to get legislation put into place that got us to at least showing how much that is being deferred at any one point in time. Now, the problem that we've got with this is not the fact so much that it's happening, because we will ultimately get that money, and I don't agree with the practice either, but we will get the money. But the problem that really it poses is being able to look forward then and project where we're going to be at year end and when we do budgets. The legislation that we did push through tells us how much is being deferred, if we want to use that term, and then we can take that and do good projections.
Ms. Mercer?
I disagree with the practice. I think, you know, one of my core values is equality and that things need to be fair. So I think if they're going to do this for all businesses, then all businesses should get a chance to do it. If they're doing it for some, then I think that that it's not fair and that the practice needs to be reconsidered.
Mr. Schindeldecker?
I'd have to agree on the surface. It kind of looks bad, but understand a couple of things. We are very blessed in having a number of companies that are international in scope. Can you imagine a Marathon or a Cooper or a Whirlpool or some of these companies having to come up with the exact criteria that meets the requirements for the Findlay City income tax when they may not have they may have different deadlines in different countries? The information that deals with a particular aspect of their business may come in a different form. I think it's necessary in some instances that that some businesses be allowed to defer their taxes until they can actually compile them. But I have to agree it doesn't look as good as it ought to.
Okay. Ms. Harshfield?
I totally disagree with the practice. It might be okay if we could have transparency. I have had the feeling that if the large businesses want to have this extended to them, that they ought to waive the so-called right to privacy over it. And I think that smaller businesses should have equal access to the practice if they also require it. I've had a couple of people tell me that they did try applying for it and were completely ignored. So.
Mr. Russell?
I agree with the practice. It is complicated to understand, but taxes are not being deferred, they're being paid when due. What is being postponed is that quarterly payment. If that allows businesses to invest money, their own money, good. That's what we should be shooting for. The problem with the transparency on this issue is something known as Ohio Revised Code. We are legally not allowed to disclose information about our taxpayers in that manner, and therefore we can't say, the income tax department can't name the companies. Do I wish they could? Absolutely I do. And I would like to know what in their criteria allows them to participate in the program. But it's not about me and what I want, it's about following the law. Does every business have an opportunity to participate in this? If you meet the criteria, yes. If you don't get, if you do not get the answer you want, you have the right to talk to the income tax board and appeal the decision and have the conversation.
And there's a minute on that. I think we have time for one more. We started with you on that one, right? Okay. So we have time for one more question before we get into our closing statements. So I get to steal from your pile of questions too. So,
okay.
What can the city be doing, if anything, to aid in the fight against opioid addiction in our area? We'll start with you, Mr. Wobser.
It's a very good question. I think that what we're doing currently is a very good first step. Right now, our firefighters and emergency responders are carrying Narcan with them. I know that some people want to look at giving that to our police officers also. That obviously is a great expense that we would have to look at, not to mention the training that would have to go along with that. So that's something that has a financial element to it that would have to be looked at very hard. I really believe that what we can do at this point in time is to continue to pressure our state representatives to come up with a solution at the state side of this. Last night, Mary Taylor was in town, governor candidate, and she's going to work very hard on that. I know that Robert Sprague is also working hard on our behalf. So I think we wait until the state comes out with their plans, and then we will fall in line and do what we can in step with what the state decides to do.
Ms. Mercer?
So So the police aren't carrying Narcan, and I think that I'm concerned about this because they are one of our first responders. They should be given the choice that they can carry if they'd like to carry Narcan. We are in fact training our citizens in this town to carry Narcan, and all they have to do is watch a 20-minute video. And that is not preparing them for when a person might come out of their overdose, which they could be violent. Our police are much more prepared for those types of situations. So I don't think I've heard the reasons. I don't think I've heard good enough reasons for why our police department aren't carrying Narcan. There are several police departments around Northwest Ohio that do. And I think that sends a message to the people in this community that they might not matter or their lives aren't mattering as much. I think Findlay. Okay.
Apologies for barging in. Mr. Schindler.
The time will come very soon when our police department will be carrying Narcan. There was a strategic decision to put Narcan in the hands of our firefighters in the first place because of the nature of responding to an emergency. Police are trying to save lives, maybe guns drawn, that type of situation. The fire department has a different role, and the decision was strategic to put them in the hands of the firefighters first, but the police will be having them very soon.
Ms. Hartsfield.
I'm glad to hear that the police will soon be carrying Narcan because I do think that's one step that's very, very needed around here. I don't think we can wait for the state to pass some new ways of doing things in order to try to improve the opioid situation. I think that education locally is a relatively inexpensive way. We need, first off, to have a really stronger than ever program somehow to publicize to people the dangers of opioid drugs. Because so much of it starts with the legal prescriptions, and people are perfectly innocent of understanding how serious they can be. And so that would be one. I also think that we need to do more for public understanding, to have sympathy for the people that are trying to recover. They work very hard, they suffer a lot, they go through so much, and some people still think that they're criminals and probably not worth all the time and trouble to save. And I think that's a horrible, horrible problem. They don't understand.
A minute there. Mr. Russell.
The city is on the front lines of the opiate addiction problem. When I did my ride-alongs with the police and fire and also up in the dispatch center, every single one of the folks I talked to, they are affected on a regular basis by this. Our fire department does carry Narcan. The Narcan's provided by the health department. They carry it because they are the first responders to medical emergencies. They're the ones that are going to be responding to overdoses, and they are more trained in the usage. Our police do not carry Narcan because they are not necessarily trained in that manner, and there's also a liability anytime that we are providing medicine to a citizen, especially without their immediate consent. Liability issues are brought to the forefront, and that's why we're now focused on the fire department. This is much greater than a city issue. Two books to read, Dreamland and also Glass House.
I'll let you finish the thought there.
Will give you a good perspective on this. It is a frustrating problem. I share the frustrations.
Okay. Ms. Lockard.
Yeah, first off, I think it's interesting that Mr. Wobser feels that Mary Taylor is going to lead the war against opioid addiction when she was quoted in the Courier this morning as saying she will do everything possible to strike down Obamacare, which means loss of health care for a lot of these same people. So, enough said. We hear every day how the opioid epidemic is affecting us. One of the things that has been shown is that families need to be involved in the recovery process. And so I think council needs to do everything they can to support families, whether that's making some resources available to grandparents raising grandchildren, other healthcare, things like that. But also there's some good news on this front. The Findlay Police Department recently received a $100,000 state grant to work with mental health professionals, substance abuse counselors, and others to form quick response teams. So in the event of an overdose, they are responding to these families and these victims of drug overdoses. Another thing is that our drug court, and studies have shown that drug courts do work, has received a $60,000 grant for probation officers. Thank you.
Steve, it took us all forum to get there, but I think we have a chance for a rebuttal here.
All right.
If Mr. Wobser would like one.
You're right. Mary Taylor did indeed talk about striking down Obamacare, and she talked about replacing it with something that's going to work.
Something wonderful.
Thank you.
I think we'll have to leave it at that, as we do need to get into our closing arguments, or our closing statements, I guess we should say. We're not in a court of law. We did agree at the beginning, or before we started, that we would go in reverse order, so Mary had the last opening statement, so she'll have the first closing statement.
Much of what we've been talking about here are actually things that we mostly agree on. I do think that we all hate the epidemic of drug abuse. We all hate the other local problems with infrastructure and the traffic problems. But so many of the items are not yet close to solutions. I think that the flooding issue is a big one. We don't have that's not much in our hands, but we can all be happy about the fact that Findlay has in general been enjoying a lot of prosperity. The sad fact is that not everyone is able to share in that prosperity, and many who do work here can't afford to also live here, and a lot of people would like to work here but can't even afford to commute. So I do think that we need to work on these problems and make it more attractive and possible for people to be able to do this. There was one statement that I read recently in the paper that a council member made about the Republican way of government serving Findlay well. There are plenty of Findlay residents who do not feel that they are served well, and we need to get to all of them. In fact, a lot of them don't have enough money to live on in spite of the fact that they have a full-time job, and some people have multiple jobs. There is one thing they can be happy about. At least they know that they can look forward to Medicare and to Social Security, and I would say that's the democratic way of government running. We Democrats also understand how to use money wisely. If you really study more recent spending patterns, you see that Republicans are the big spenders. I know that'll ring badly, but Democrats know how to put the money where it will do the most good. And we sincerely want to do good. I think of the drug issue with that one, actually. That's one of the things I have in mind when I say that.
That's 2 minutes.
Okay.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
51 years ago, when my wife Bonnie and I decided that we were going to break away from our roots in Pennsylvania and Maryland and move back to Ohio, where we met in college. When we drove into Findlay for a job interview, coming in Fostoria Avenue, we both said almost simultaneously, "This feels like home." Even nevertheless, we kind of thought we'd stay in Findlay a couple of years and then move on to a bigger community, Lima, or not Lima, Dayton or Toledo or Columbus or something, but it didn't take us long to realize that it not only felt like home, it was home. We raised a family here, buried a daughter, saw all of our grandchildren grow up and go through the Findlay schools. We had an opportunity to avail ourselves of the many opportunities that the University of Findlay, Weinbrenner Seminary, the public schools have to offer. It's just been a community that has been blessed by geography, by the forward-thinking people that have built reservoirs and built bridges and built industrial parks, and we have been blessed economically and culturally and in many other ways, and as a family we have been blessed too. I would like to humbly think I had a small part in some of that, and I humbly ask for your vote on November 7th.
Ms. Mercer.
Tonight we've heard many valid and valuable statements. and it's refreshing to see different opinions coming to the table and having a good old-fashioned conversation. In fact, isn't this what politics, what serving a community is all about? You see, it's come to my attention that the differences need to come to the table. I think that sometimes you don't see what I see. If you aren't paying attention to other sides of Findlay, you're missing what being a council person is all about. And do you see what I see? I don't think you see the side where families are so desperate to make ends meet but still can't afford rent in this town. Because if you did, you'd be making housing a priority. I don't think you see people struggling with addiction, because if you did, you would be making a priority to include more recovery housing and to help inform the police what they should be doing, which is carrying Narcan, because in fact, all lives do matter. You can't have a micropolitan city and act like only certain parts matter. Caring and supporting for all Findlay's residents, young, old, rich, poor, gay, straight, black, white, Christian, Muslim, Republican, and Democrat. These are the bread and butter issues. Emboldened, formidable, are just a few words the Republicans have used to describe the Democrats running for city council. And I'd have to agree. And I'd also like to add some other words to their list. Empowered, empathetic, consistent, integrity, and fed up. So Findlay, it's up to you now. If you believe in a two-party system, vote Democrat. If you believe we need to consider other pressing concerns in this town, then I urge you to vote Democrat. And if you believe we need different voices and sides around the table that make decisions that impact all of us, then I need you to vote for me, Heidi Mercer, November 7th. Thank you.
I'd like to start off with thanking Doug and Steve for hosting this forum tonight and giving everybody the opportunity to see the differences that the candidates are bringing to the table to help empower and help you with your vote. I think that I will finish up with where I started. Experience in city government matters. Our ability to look at our income and decide what we're going to do with that best suits this city is paramount, and we're doing a great job of that, and we're going to continue to get better. Understand that when you look at wanting to look at other ways for the city to spend money, alternative things to spend money on, you've got to take that money from something else. So if we want to do a program for low-income housing or something like that, what are we going to take the money away from? I believe that City Council actually reflects the conservative nature and values of this city. I'll close with asking everybody that's watching or listening to this tonight to, number one, get out and vote. And make sure your neighbors go vote too. It is paramount that everybody get out and be part of the process, regardless of who you're voting for. And then last, I will hope that you will get out and I will ask for your vote for Jeff Wobser for re-election of City Council at large. And I look forward to the next couple of months and continued conversation with our Democrat opponents. Thank you.
Ms. Lockard?
Yeah, I could be shooting myself in the foot here, but I have to admit that the three gentlemen sitting at this table tonight have not done a bad job on City Council. City Council's a difficult job. I sort of wish they had done a bad job because they'd be a lot easier to beat, but that being said, but I do think one thing that council needs is when decisions are made, they have to be made with how it's impacting everyone in the city. I've seen decisions made where people don't think about what it's like, how that decision will affect you if you have no car, if you're a single mom, if you don't have health care, if your son or daughter is addicted to drugs. So I think just sort of stopping and thinking about that part of our population, which is a huge part, is something that needs to be done. I think Findlay's at a crossroads right now. We can cultivate that old reputation of a city where only a select few are welcome and where our underserved residents remain underserved, or we can become a more tolerant, inclusive, and progressive city, a city where everyone wants to live, work, and contribute their unique skills and talents. It's up to you, voters, and I do ask for your vote on Tuesday, November 7th. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Russell.
Thank you once again to WFIN, the Courier, the University of Findlay, Steve and Doug for having this tonight, having an opportunity to talk about city business. The city has not achieved their success by accident. It's a result of concentrating in our efforts in areas that are the city's responsibilities. It's a result of having a plan and executing that plan. Plan the work, work the plan. It's a result of breaking that have it, spend it cycle that so many other cities and levels of government have, so that we can get the most value possible out of each tax dollar that we receive. Most important, it's a result of cooperation. It's the result of city departments cooperating with each other, always focused on delivering the best value for their citizens. It's a result of cooperating with the county and the agricultural community, the agricultural and business communities, the Watershed Conservancy District on flood mitigation. We should be seeing some actual shovels in the dirt come 2018 as the benching projects take place in downtown Findlay. It's a result of cooperation between the public and private. That's how we deliver nationally recognized economic development. Recreational facilities like the Field of Dreams, what an outstanding facility. And affordable housing, like the new Crawford Station apartments that are going to be built on Melrose Avenue in 2018. Yes, affordable housing, that is being built here in Findlay. Cooperation is going to be how we must attack all our future challenges we face. And number one of that is the entire community is going to have to cooperate as we attack the opiate and heroin epidemic. My promise to you, I'm going to continue to work and work cooperatively with anyone who's focused on improving the lives of the citizens of Findlay. I'm going to continue to give you my best efforts, my time and my energy. I'll continue to do my best to communicate with you. I'll write the 419, my short summary after most council meetings.
I know, I've been cutting off everybody all night.
Hey, thanks everybody for coming out.
Let's get a round of applause for our candidates if we could. And I do appreciate you putting up with me barging in the entire evening. I also want to thank
you
Steve.
were doing it.
Steve didn't have to do it. I do want to thank Steve Dillon from the Courier for co-moderating tonight. And of course, thank you to UFTV for televising the forum. Of course, WFIN 1330 WFIN for live radio coverage and coverage at WFIN.com as well. Thanks most of all to those of you who watched and listened. We hope you heard something tonight that solidified your sense of candidates. If it did and you're not registered to vote, you still have about an hour and a half to get down to the Board of Elections. You can do that. Early voting begins tomorrow, and I'm Doug Jenkins wishing you a good evening from the University of Findlay.